Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to Circling Seattle Sports. We're back with another post-game reaction. There's not a ton to react to besides the fact that Seattle has taken care of the Dallas Wings 2 times in a span of 3 days. Dallas even a little bit healthier than the time that the Storm saw them earlier in the season on the road in Dallas. Just despite the Wings having a lot of talent, Rowan, I mean, it's just, I don't know, maybe a little surprising to me that they're not better than they are currently. I mean, anyway, at least in regards to what we're looking at with this Storm team, they took care of business. It was a single-digit game at half, but Seattle was really able to pull away in the second half, and largely, I think the third quarter they had a 12-2 run and just kind of established themselves from there on out. The Seattle's bench got some good minutes, which I'm sure certain fans will be happy about with Keanu Williams and Nika Mule getting more than like 30 seconds of this game, 7 minutes to be exact. And Jewell Loyd continues to have a really excellent homestand after so much kerfuffle about her struggles efficiency-wise to begin the season. Rowan, we kind of talked about it before we started recording, but any general thoughts on this win? Seattle's fourth in a row and being 4 wins in 4 games on this current 9-game homestand.
Yeah, I mean, it's just exciting to kind of think back to last season. Like, I was surprised and kind of forgot that now they, have won two, no, three more games than they won at all last season. Last season they only won 11. So, it's just crazy to think back to that, like only winning 11 games in one season, and then now just seeing how much they've grown. But yeah, it's hard to have some takeaways when it's just kind of like they just played super well. And I think that my biggest takeaway, honestly, is comparing to last season, which obviously there are a lot of new pieces, but just thinking about how last year third quarters were so rough for the Storm. It was just like, felt like every game, we were all asking, Noe, like, so what are you going to do to try and fix this like third quarter problem? And these past 2 games specifically, and really throughout the season, it's been that the third quarter has been what has won them the game. Like at the half, it's kind of like, okay, you're ahead, but not by very much. I actually took a picture of the the halftime stats and was surprised to see that Dallas, I think, was shooting better than the Storm. I think they were shooting threes better. Basically, in every stat category, I think, except for assists, maybe, they were better. And so it was kind of surprising to be like, okay, the Storm still has a little bit of a lead, but not much. And just kind of seeing how they were able to turn that around, finish with a better field goal percentage, finished with better than the Wings in every statistical aspect. But I just think those third quarters have really been key. And it's really interesting to see how it's just completely different from last season.
Well, and to your point, you talk about, last season one, like, and you were there with me. So like there were so many games where, as you mentioned, the Storm were in games, they were competitive. It's not like this was they were a bad team record wise and all that, and they had their deficiencies, but they were in games. Like, again, outside of the Vegas games, because obviously Seattle challenged a lot, and yeah, there were just spots in that game where there was a lull, and the other team they were playing was able to take advantage of that lull. So yeah, I mean, and that also leads into it. I remember, I think it was Jewell talked about this really recently, actually. It was sometime during this homestand where she said that this year's growth does not happen without last year, which I thought was interesting because, again, anybody who's just kind of looking at like the general overlay, they're like, that doesn't make sense. You guys were bad last year as a different group. Well, I understand that. I mean, someone who really stood out to me in this game, Jordan Horston, like grew throughout last year, grew through this offseason and built off last year. You could look at Jewell Loyd in the way that she was able to kind of have to deal with being the number one prime option, the leader, and I'm sure she took away pieces from that. Ezzie Magbegor had a big year like a lot of your key factors did have, like, they had to go through the struggle of last year and they had to learn tough lessons. So I think there is merit to that. You know what I mean? And even if it is learning that in a game like this where you beat a team where your biggest lead was 31, like I like I don't think this year's Storm team, even if you even take out number 3 and number 4 and NECA and Skylar, like the roster that was pretty solidly in place doesn't necessarily perform as well without having to go through what they did last year, if that jumble makes sense.
Definitely. And also, I mean, just thinking about Jordan, you know, we talked so much like in the post-game presser and just have been talking so much about how she has been able to rise to the challenge with defending the best, you know, players in the league. You know, every matchup she has had has been something that, you know, usually vets are tasked with. And I think that last season she was in a lot of those similar situations because she had to be, because there were no other options. And you know, I think last year we've talked in other things about how much we've seen Jordan's confidence grow since last season. But I think that even when she was struggling with her confidence last season in those moments, you know, having to just be forced into that position that we have no other option. You're a rookie, but you are our best defender. You're going to get a lot of minutes. That helped her a lot, I think, to now, you know, you can just tell that she's so confident. She is very proud of her defense. She's very eager to talk about it. Like today in the post game, she's just like, you know, I'm having fun. I'm good at it. You know, she's just kind of bragging about herself, as she should. And I definitely think that obviously adding new components to the team makes a difference. But you're right that, you know, with Jewell, even everyone was worried, is her consistency gonna, you know, be better when Stewie leaves? Like, you know, it used to be, okay, Jewell's not doing well, Stewie's picking up the slack scoring wise. And it was kind of like, okay, Jewell, you have to be that consistent because we don't really have any other scoring options. So definitely I think that there is a big part that the credit needs to be given. I mean, same, we've talked as well about, you know, people saying that Noelle should have been fired after last season. And it's just like, you know, you can't, those conversations can't just end when you're having a winning season, you know, and can only be when you're having a losing season. And it's like, no one's saying that anymore when she had to build, you know, she had to build from something. And clearly she has learned things and grown in things, you know, notably that third quarter. I think that she's figured out how to make good halftime adjustments. And she was talking about that post game as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember, you know, again, take only so much from people online because they only know so much. But there was a comment, it was within the first 3 games of the year where it was like, oh, Noelle Quinn ball. It was like it's just Noelle's gonna Noelle. And I was like, what does this mean?
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean by that? And you know, so much of the talk, I felt like, at least being here and you know, hearing the questions, was about, you know, in that first like early stretch of the season where Seattle really, I mean, again, you play Minnesota, the back to back. The early stretch wasn't ideal. You lose, you know, Neko is out for a few games, right? It was always about, you feel like there's all these questions about chemistry, and it was like, again, they are the team talked about it. Their training camp in the early parts of the season, they were going to put it together, and I mean, we're seeing that. But part of that Noel ball, if we're going to use that has been talked about, and I always like cringe when people who are either not familiar with the team or new ask about the identity of this team. It's defense. You talk to Noelle Quinn, she's going to talk about the defensive side of the ball.
Always, for years.
Her players are going to talk about the defensive side of the ball. But I'm like, that was going to like one I wanted to talk about with this game is the defensive aspect of things, because I realize that Dallas turns the ball over a lot this season particularly. But I mean, at times I feel like this season we haven't seen the Storm convert the best off turnovers. And I mean, 24 points off turnovers is a really solid number. But even if you look at the other side of things, Seattle only had 4 less turnovers than Dallas, which I think 4 it's not a lot. It's not like it's an insignificant number in a way, but I mean, they only allowed 11 points off of it. So, I mean, you're not exactly just giving away things. Noel talked about it post-game, Rowan. I'm sure you heard about it, limiting teams in transition. You know, you've got dangerous players like this Dallas. It's a befuddling to me to look at Dallas. You've got Enrique, you've got Kalani
Exactly.
Brown, you've got the size that they do, and I realize that without a few players, still that you're missing a Sabali, like hello. But just seeing that and realizing they're not playing a certain way, even acknowledging that, but knowing that your defense still did a really solid job tonight, is something that's big. I think that's big. You're going to have to play later in this homestand, Vegas and Minnesota, so you're going to get chances again. You know, you're going to play a team with Chelsea Gray again. You're going to play Minnesota team that you've lost to, was it 3 times already
3
this
times, I believe,
year?
yeah.
And like with longer seasons, like in basketball, in hockey, baseball, regular season largely functions as a way to build habits, right? Like when you're in the playoffs, when you're in the nitty gritty, like when you don't have time to think about things necessarily in those big games, like your habits are going to come out. And I think it's so big during this homestand for Seattle to build these habits. Like obviously there's going to be that time off of the Olympic break where I'm sure you'll need to get back into things to an extent, right? But it's just so big in my mind to lock down on your things defensively during this stretch of time, because I mean, if Seattle does things right over these 9 games, like 9 games out of a 40-game season, that's
Huge.
massive, right? You see where I'm going with this? Like, this is such a
Definitely.
big opportunity. I've talked to Noel about it. Like, don't want to get comfortable being at home for so long, but like taking advantage of the resources of being at home, home court meals, having your facility. Like, this is just such. I don't want it to overstate it, perhaps. I don't want to understate it either. Like the potential that lies within this homestand, and I'm like seeing that with the defensive effort. Like I was a little worried in the first quarter of both these Dallas games because it's like Dallas kind of was getting what they wanted. Um, but yeah, like you said, to go back to your third quarter, seeing the change, seeing the flip, the switch flipped is good because as you mentioned, like that was a thing. People were like, "Oh, this coach doesn't know." Again, they didn't use her name, which was something that annoyed me. This coach doesn't know what she's doing. So yeah, I don't know. To see the defensive effort, defensive intensity, all of it just sort of start to click and be such a big part of their game, in my mind is important. I wanted to talk about that.
Definitely.
With player of the game, I mean, we talked about Jewell Loyd. We'll talk about Jewell Loyd, but I want to talk about Jordan Horston more. So I like acknowledge Jewell Loyd, 26 points. You know, she comes off back-to-back 30-point games, I believe it is. I
Mhm.
mean, 3 games in a row with 25 plus is really solid. And I feel like we're seeing the Jewell Loyd we're used to seeing, or at least got used to seeing last year with the elite shot making. 8 for 14, 3 for 6 from 3, you know, just really solid there. And again, it's remarkable to see her lead that way. Skylar Diggins-Smith, kind of quiet. She only took 6 shots. Ezzy, again, 12 points isn't quiet. It's
Would
double
be,
digits.
yeah.
It didn't really feel like the rest of your core forward had a big game
Mhm.
necessarily, right? At least in my opinion. I mean, if you have thoughts on that, let me know. But just nice to see Jewell continue to do this, find her spots, hit her spots after that early part. Do you have anything Jewell wise that you want to add on before we move on to Miss Horston?
Not particularly, but just, talking about thoughts on that core four, I agree. It wasn't a huge game for, any of them particularly. I mean, Ezzy still having 2 blocks a game that, huge. It's, shouldn't be understated. But I think that who, really was shining through this game were the people that are outside of the core four. I was actually going to bring up Jordan is still, I think, my player of the game, but someone I was really impressed by was Joyner Holmes. I
Mm-hmm.
think we talked about how when she gets more minutes, usually last season specifically, this season I'd have to look at it a bit more, but when they signed her again, I said when she's given minutes, she uses them pretty wisely. I mean, she had 8 points, she had 3 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 block, 8 points, pretty like 8 points in 15 minutes is some pretty decent minutes. She had 2 huge threes. So, I like to see that. I like to see Mercedes with 7 points. We've talked about how we really just want to see her continuing to, produce. So I think that would I have liked to see more from the core four? Yes, but also, love seeing Sammy, Joyner, Mercedes, getting some more minutes. So they're also some of my key players that I think are important to highlight too.
Absolutely. And Rowan should give herself credit because you were the one who brought up Joyner getting more minutes when we had, I think it was our May month in review. So give yourself your own credit.
Thank you.
But that was like, I'm sure you might have heard it. Like, I was curious about Coach Quinn's thoughts on that because I did think Joyner did have a solid game. And I was like, hey, we talked about it last year. Her versatility is big. She can pass the ball pretty well. I mean, she's got some solid length there as a forward. Like, for her versatility is a thing. And yeah, the big threes, I was like, okay, Joyner. So yeah, no, absolutely on that regard. And at least you talk about her as well as Mercedes. I think our friend Bella Munson looked over at me at one point in the first half and was like, your two biggest players being in foul trouble early on isn't great, and Ezzy and Mercedes, because I think they both had 2 fouls relatively early on. I was like, ooh. And so, while, at least forward wise or players who primarily play the 3, in my mind, at least, if Joyner plays more of the 4, I could be wrong. But you look at, yes, Jordan and Victoria have gotten a lot of discussion this year. I mean, Joyner comes into that as well. Like, she can play in that position, probably can play the 4 if you want her, if you need her to. So she's, if the Storm are going to, we've talked about a bunch of players and I've said this, but I think it's all true. If the Storm are going to the heights that they want to and that there's expectations for, you're going to need those contributions all across the board. And Joyner is one of those players. And with her versatility, I think she's in good potential to have a big impact at points throughout the course of the year. So yes, give Joyner her flowers as well. But taking that as well and building off of what you're saying, with some of the bench, like taking what we talked about in the May month of review with Kiana and Nika, if you're going to get through the course of this season, to also touch back on what I just said about Joyner, with what you want to do, you need these players to get game reps to an extent. And that does include maybe more minutes for Mercedes, for Joyner. I mean, Sammy is kind of like your 6th woman, so I don't know if you need more from that. And she's a player that's seen a bunch already throughout the course of her career. But even now, Victoria, who's in a different role.
I wanted to talk about that.
Right? So it's just – and then at the points at the end of the game, I think Jordan and Victoria were on the court at the same time. So it's an interesting sort of roster puzzle that the Storm have right now. I think it's a good one because it's not like last year where we're talking about, okay, you need this, that, right? I don't know. It's interesting because you've got 3 really talented forwards that could kind of rotate. And I know Nneka's a forward, but you're not taking her out of the starting spot, right? Yeah, no, I just do like seeing Joyner, Mercedes, and Victoria get more extended minutes there at the end of the game. And Jewell Loyd, I think Jewell said that in the postgame. She was like, we felt that there were games we could do that this year, and we didn't, and we were disappointed in that. So
it's interesting to hear her acknowledge that too, because I think that that's been a thought for a lot of people. Or again, we're talking about the internet here, like, lots of people saying the Storm are ahead. Why is there no minutes, of course, for Nika, as we hear on the internet very often. But I do think it's interesting. I was honestly surprised to see her and Kiana go in as early as they did, just because I think maybe, I don't know, just fear of losing that lead. But I thought that they did really well in those 7 minutes, for what there was. But anyway, well, I know we were going to talk about Jordan, but I was going to say back to Victoria for a second. I know that we kind of talked about it, but it was really interesting after the Sun game, the Connecticut game a few games ago, Jordan Horston's first start. Trying to piece everything together here. After Jordan's first start, I remember asking Noelle, it's a very big decision to, change the starting lineup that you've had all season for this game against, at that point, the top team in the league. What was the thought? You clearly trusted Jordan a lot. What was the thought process? And what I thought was really interesting is that she made it very clear that, she this was a kind of a strictly matchup thing. You know, she was like, we knew that Jordan could guard DeWanna Bonner really well. She did super successfully. She was like, that she talked to both Jordan and Victoria, about it, and kind of just saying we're going matchup by matchup. But I guess what I wanted to talk to you about is, at this point, we've seen, Jordan successfully guard the, best players on all these teams. Is this going to be something that starts to be, she just has, made herself a spot in the starting lineup, and it's not a case by case basis, if that makes sense. It's like we've seen Victoria's minutes plummet since Jordan started, and it's just interesting to be like, is it going to be the thing kind of like last season where a lot of these starting lineup decisions were game by game just based on matchups? Or at this point, is it like you can't keep Jordan out of the starting lineup the way that she has disrupted defensively? So all of that to get back to Jordan and say that she did amazingly tonight.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, it's funny you talk about last year and different sort of decisions to be made. I remember the longest time we were like, why isn't Ivana Dorkic starting over Yvonne Turner? Why? Like, because I remember what was it? Noah, of course, Noelle, right? It was Yvonne's defense. And I was like, well, Ivana's not bad. She's not bad defensively, and she brings more upside offensively. And then she ended up asking for a release, and so that didn't matter. It's just funny to hear about what we were talking about last year compared to this year.
Yeah.
I think if you're looking at it right now, it was funny hearing about it, like after that Connecticut game and with that answer that Noelle gave, I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And then the Fever was like, okay, I mean, if you want her to guard Caitlin, then sure. And then it's just kind of gone on. And I, at least, because I talked about this quote all the time, right? When we would talk about things, or even when I've talked to Noelle about what she said about Victoria in the beginning of the season, in the training camp, about how she can essentially put her out there with that core four and not have to worry about her because of how sound she was defensively and, the 3-point percentage that they feel comfortable with her, or they wanted to get her back to. I remember Noelle's like, I want to get her back to like a 40% clip. I just think that if you look at the two players in Jordan Horston and Victoria Vivians, you've got more upside in Jordan. I mean, whether it's defensively, length, the sort of, I'm not saying Victoria doesn't give energy or effort. She does, but like Jordan's motor, I feel, is very high, some of the highest I've seen. And offensively, like, I see it every practice. Jordan's working on her threes. So she's working on that. I think Jordan gives you more offensively, whether it's, there was a play in this game. It must have been the second half where Jordan like went soaring through the sky to tip a rebound out to the 3-point line to her team. And I was just like, maybe last year would have been surprised, but I see it so often from Jordan. I'm not surprised anymore. I'm sure as she continues to work on it, the 3 will come, but her ability to facilitate, her ability to crash boards, her ability to cut to the rim, like, I just think she gives you more. Like, while Victoria gives you some things, Jordan gives you that and more. And it feels like a situation with like Ezzy a few years ago. To an extent, you're not bringing in a Tina Charles this year, but it's like the progression's happening. We're seeing the growth be in front of us. Don't mess with it, in my opinion. So that's where I see it, at least. Don't get me wrong. Victoria Vivians can help you there. They were getting her to a stronger 3-point clip. She's been really solid defensively. She's been a player you don't have to worry about. Like, we're not sitting here being like, oh, like, is she struggling? Like, and it's a quieter game. With how things are going, I think taking her out of the starting lineup again and having her lose minutes would be a mistake to an extent, because you are disrupting maybe the growth that's happening. So that's where my thoughts are on it. Like, you're guarding the best players in the world, and I'm sure you heard Jewell's quote, like, post game about how when Jordan went to train with you in the offseason. She was guarding some of the best players in the world, talking about guarding grown men. Like, again, if this team is going where it should go, Jordan Horston's going to be guarding. I don't know who it would be in the playoffs. Like if it's Vegas, like you're going up against an Asia Wilson, she'll probably switch on to a Chelsea Gray. Like at least in Vegas, Minnesota probably we'll see it in a few games. These teams like Nafisha Collier is one of the best players in the league. Probably will task her there. Like she is your top defender, and we've seen her handle the best players in the world.
In so many different positions too. I mean, that's the thing that's incredible is that she's so versatile. She can guard the 4, guard the 5, guard the 3, anything. It's really incredible. It's crazy to see.
She gave Arike Ogunbowale fits tonight guarding, the 2 because I think they had Odyssey Sims start tonight. Yeah. Because I thought they were starting Uzan again tonight and made my graphic too soon. So yeah, I don't know. That's my thoughts on it. At least if you have anything different on that, let me know.
No, yeah, I agree.
With the track you're on, don't just leave it.
Yeah. I mean, like thinking about these past 4 games, it's just, double digit wins in, every game. Yeah, every game. Connecticut. Well, sorry. I said that too soon before fact checking, but double digit games the past 2. I think that it
Oh no, yeah.
Yeah.
I think the past 4 games are double digit.
Yeah. And also if you look at who specifically Jordan was guarding every game, it's also just, shutting down those players specifically. It's not even, someone else just had a good game. This person was cold. It just like, it's not even the other team just had a bad team performance. It was this person that Jordan was tasked with couldn't score effectively, took less shots. It's easy. It's difficult to see. I mean, kind of like what Noelle was saying post game, it's difficult to practice defense. It's also difficult to see defense, without watching the game, if that makes sense. It's difficult to see defense in a box score, but when you watch the game, it is so clear that you can see, that Jordan is just being so successful and really, really, really helping the team. And so I agree. I think Victoria's great. We've given her flowers on here. We talked about her. I think she's great. I think that she is a really great veteran, alternate option that in the past, again, we've also talked about this, that, Noe really values those veterans, bringing in veterans to be there. But in the past, those veterans that have been on the bench haven't effectively helped the box score as well. And I think that Victoria is a really great kind of happy medium with that. Is, she's still really effective. She's an effective leader. She, seems to be really helpful with the younger players, but she, we love Victoria here, but I think that Jordan's the better pick right now for starting, and she's just been super effective.
Yeah, I just think, like we've said, with the trajectory that's going on right now, whether it's gaining the confidence, just performing outright, not just necessarily showing potential, gaining outright. And then Noe talked about it too, having the 2 accountability partners that she does in Nneka Ogwumike and Ezi Magbagor. And I think Nneka's talked about it, like she tells them they are the future of this team, and they are. I mean, it's great right now, and you want to maximize having Nneka and Skylar here. But hopefully, beyond that, when we're in 25 or 26, like hopefully Jordan and Ezi are 2 of the players that are helping to lead this team, so it's I don't know. It's always remarkable to see players take steps and see it happen over time. Like for as many of the games we were at last year where it's like, oh, they lost again. It's like seeing the growth is definitely something that's always fun to look at in regards to that. I mean, during these, we normally look at improvements, but I don't, we've kind of looked up and down this team over this past 2 games against Dallas, and this, I'm sure there are things offensively they want to do better. Even I'd argue this wasn't their best game. Like offensively, they could be better. You didn't necessarily get other players super involved. but just your defense was so good. It kind of reminds me of the Sparks game where it's like your offense wasn't great, but your defense was so good that it didn't really end up mattering. Not verbatim that game, but in that aspect. So I guess, Rowan, what are you excited about to see against Chicago for 2 games? With Angel Reese here, that'll be fun. I
That'll
mean,
be super
watching
fun.
matchups there, whether it is maybe having Jordan there. I mean, NECA against Angel Reese, that's sort of fun.
I'm super excited about that. I mean, I think that Chicago's been a really fun team. I've really enjoyed watching them. So I'm just more excited to see, we've seen the Storm play a lot of the same teams, it feels like at this point. So really exciting to see them play someone else, see them match up against someone else. I think that Angel versus NECA. I mean, Angel has obviously, we're talking about the Storm here, but if we're just touching on Angel for a moment, I mean, she's been really fun to watch with these, she's been really rising to the challenge with these, veteran players, great matchups against Asia, great matchups, so I think that her and NECA, I think that's going to be really, really fun. Just, thinking, I feel like I'm only thinking about Angel right now on the team at the moment. I'm like, who? Yeah.
Marina Mabry is always a
Yep.
player who feels really
Yeah.
risky, and it will make you pay if you don't do the right job against her. Then Kennedy
Definitely.
Carter's also leading this
She's been
team,
playing amazingly. Yeah.
and it's remarkable looking at these just their stats, right? And you see the games played. She's only started 5 games
Mm.
for Chicago, which is interesting to me.
And
But
she really pushed her way into the starting lineup. I remember that it was, there were a few games there where everyone was like, why isn't she starting yet? And then finally she did. And I'm really impressed with her.
oh yeah, and then this is garbage, so I shouldn't interact with it. But everyone's like, "Oh, people are only gonna know her. She's relevant now because of the run-in with Caitlyn." And I was like, "If you know ball, who Kennedy
I
Carter
mean,
is." I'm not saying
I
she's
remember Kennedy
amazing,
from
but
college.
yeah,
She was
you know what I mean.
incredible in college. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean it's I mean they're it'll be interesting. Oh, ooh, and Camilla. Okay, yeah, no, this is gonna be exciting. It's just
Yeah.
like it sucks, in terms of teams with young talent, like Chicago is one of them, at least looking at this. And there's some other fun players here. It's nice to see Diamond the Shields get minutes
Mhm.
still. I've always appreciated Diamond the Shields, but them in LA, in LA largely with Rakia and Cam, and obviously sad for Cam. I don't know. I just look at that and it's like Seattle should handle business. While
Mhm.
we're talking about the Storm, Seattle should handle business over these next 2 games against Chicago. It's just fun to see the future of the league, as
Definitely.
well as how the Storm, how that reacts, right?
Mhm.
Because my way to wrap this up is that while you've got these 4 games in a row against 2 teams, 2 against Dallas, 2 against Chicago, like I talked about with this homestand, you need to build good habits.
Mhm.
Build the good habits defensively, be locked into your schemes. And Jewell even talked about it, even if it's not the schemes wise, athletically, just instinctually playing well defensively, build that now. Because then after you've got these 2 games against Chicago and coming off these 2 games against Dallas, you've got Vegas and then you've got Minnesota. Rowan and I were talking about it with standings, if Seattle's going to be able to make it higher than the 4th spot. Say you do things well, like that game against Minnesota could end up mattering. If
Mhm.
Vegas goes on a run, I think they're 4-0 since Chelsea Gray is back.
Yeah.
That game against them will matter.
Yeah.
You need to take care of business, handle the momentum well, keep it going, because like we said earlier, these 9 games could be very big for this Storm team going forward. So that next game, unless you've got anything else and I'm cutting you off.
No, I mean, I was just going to say, when they're talking about making, using opportunities to get reps for bench players, I don't want to underestimate Chicago because they've had some really great games. I think,
Mhm.
like we were talking about before we started recording, every team in this league is a threat this year. And I feel like they say that every year, but it's not really true. It is true this year. It's just like, someone will lose against a team you think that they're going to beat and then beat a team it's I never want to underestimate Chicago, but I do think if you're looking ahead, looking at the schedule, beating Minnesota would be huge, beating, Vegas would be huge. And I think that these next 2 games against Chicago, if you are in the position to get some reps for the bench players, that would be the time to do it. And it would be the time to, Noe even said in the post game, it's even less of the bench players getting reps and more of the starters getting rest. And I think that is something that, if possible, they should try to capitalize a bit off of against Chicago in those 2 games, because Minnesota is such a huge, would be a huge win for them. So
yeah, no, I mean, it's helping yourself out at the end of the day. That's what that would do, because you're going to be in these dogfights against Vegas and Minnesota, and then they go on the break and you come back, and I don't know, that schedule's not too bad. At the end of the month, you do play the Liberty, and then that September's brutal because you play the Sun twice. You play in a 4-game span. You play the Liberty, the Sun twice, and then the Liberty again.
Gosh.
And then you look at it. Phoenix is, BG and Kalia Copper and Deanna
a lot.
They're not great right now record wise, but their talent's great. You've got LA, meh. Dallas, meh. LA, meh. Then you close out the season with the Vegas at home, and then the Mercury. So it's like there are going to be times where you're going to be challenged. So yeah, getting rested. You never know when that's going to come back to really help you. So that next game, July 5th at home. Got this game 5 of a 9-game homestand against the Chicago Sky, 7:00 on Ion. So until we see you again, take care of yourselves, be well, and do whatever you can to make today a great day.
Hey, Charles.
Hey, Jen.
Hey, were you going to watch the Seattle Storm away games this year?
Away games? Well, Rough and Tumble is the home of Circling Seattle Sports, so I was thinking of coming here if that's okay with you.
I think that makes a lot of sense. See you all here.